Yes, hello once again, welcome back to Classic Dirt Bike TV, and a quick mention here to all of the brand new subscribers who have just recently signed up to CDB TV, so I hope you continue to find material here to look at with regards looking at these old vintage dirt bikes. Now we're going to continue our theme of checking out the bikes that were at the 2023 Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show, and coming up next we're going to feature another couple of lovely machines that were on display at the Rhind Tutt Wasp stand over the course of the 2 days. So let's not waste any more time and jump straight into the video. And so our next featured pair of motorcycles is a nice classic two-wheeler and its three-wheeler counterpart that were both sitting proudly on display in one of the halls during the Telford show. Now, both machines were built by the Wiltshire-based Rhind Tutt Wasp company, who have been building these type of classic race bikes for more than 60 years and are still producing these type of products for the classic racing fraternity even to this day. Now, the company was started back in the early 1960s by Rob Rhind Tutt, who during his workday began by making aircraft instruments at Boscombe Down in Wiltshire in the UK, but at weekends Rob and his friend rode a sidecar outfit at local grass tracks before eventually then moving on to designing and building his own sidecar chassis, soon after which he then formed the Wasp Motorcycles company, specialising in building chassis for motocross sidecar outfits and, of course, these kind of solo motorcycles. And so the bike that we're looking at here is a Rhind Tutt Wasp RT3 Solo model, and basically Rhind Tutt supply most of the parts that you need to build this bike in a kit form, and then you just need to add the front and rear suspensions and wheels, and of course finally the engine of your choice to power it. Now, many people often think that these Rhind Tutt Wasp chassis are just Rickman frames under a different name, which is of course totally untrue, because although these do look very similar in their construction and design, our RT3 chassis is still a genuine Rhind Tutt frame, designed by Rob and made of high quality steel tubing that is bent and shaped and then bronze welded before being given a nice shiny coat of nickel plating. But once again, and just like many of the other British built scramblers of their day, the bike's chassis was also used as an oil storage tank for the engine, and the lubricant was filled through that little cap that you can see there just in front of the fuel tank. But the engineering and the build quality of these chassis, and even this rear swing arm, is simply exquisite, and these frame kits are all built using the very same original Rhind Tutt jigs that Rob designed back in the 1960s. Now, when you order one of these frame kits from RTW, basically you can just place whichever motor that takes your fancy into the chassis, and in our case here it's a big 600cc Norton Dominator 4-stroke power plant, which for me personally speaking is such a nice piece of mechanical sculpture in its own right. Twin cylinder, of course, with those two straight through exhaust pipes that run down either side of the motor. But as I said, once that you've decided which engine that you want to place into your new RTW project, then Rhind Tutt will just build your frame kit to specifically accept your choice of motor. But the combination of that nickel plated chassis and this lovely twin cylinder British made Norton engine almost look like they were both made for each other. Now, on the motor's transmission side, it has a Norton AMC gearbox, which, if my aging memory still serves me right, I think these were a 4-speed unit. But again, I'm no expert on these AMC gearboxes, so don't quote me on that particular fact. But again, the quality and the finish on this bike is just first class, and in its way, it would be such a shame to put it onto a racetrack. And as you can see, a folding kickstart to enable you to fire up that 600cc Norton power plant. And on the Norton engine's clutch side, I was told on the day that this clutch cover chain case was taken from a Royal Enfield Bullet engine from around 1955, and once more, I'm pretty sure that it was a dry clutch underneath this casing, which would more than likely have been connected to the crankshaft by way of a large type of primary chain. Now, the sparks for both of the cylinders were supplied by way of a magneto that was housed just behind those cylinder barrels, and it was also a big Amal monoblock carburetor that fed both of the cylinders with all of the fuel that they required. But what an absolute stonker of an engine, and you can only imagine the growl and the sound that comes from this twin cylinder Norton Dominator motor, especially through those two straight through exhaust pipes. And so moving on to the front end of our Wasp RT3, we have a pair of Italian Seriani suspension units, which were a regular choice on many of these kind of classic scramblers from back in the day. Naturally, these Serianis are pretty basic by today's modern standards, but in the 1960s and early 70s, these Italian forks were used by many different European motorcycle manufacturers, and for their day, they certainly did work very well. But the bike's front hub, brake and wheel are all taken from the British-made matchless motorcycles of the 1960s, and as you'd expect, these quite sizable front brake drums did have quite decent stopping power for an old school drum brake system. Not to mention, of course, that they also looked fantastic laced onto those very nice shiny nickel plated steel wheels. And so at the back end of our Norton Wasp, we have a BSA QD rear hub, or quick detach rear wheel, a system that was pioneered by BSA, where you can simply remove the rear wheel, which was on a splined hub, but you could still then leave the brake drum, drive sprocket and the chain all fixed onto the swing arm. And although it may look a bit fiddly and cumbersome, it actually worked quite well in practice. Now, of course, when you're building your Wasp motorcycle kit, you can choose whichever make or design of suspension you like on your project, and our feature bike here has a pair of classic YSS shocks on the rear. And again, these YSS units are very good quality, and they do have quite a good reputation for their performance and their reliability. But as far as I'm aware, Wasp are still using fiberglass on these fuel tanks and their body panels that all come, of course, in the frame kit, and these parts can be painted in whichever colour takes your fancy, but our plain white colour scheme here fits in very well with that nickel plated chassis, and of course that big Norton motor. Now the frame kit seats all come in this stock black leather finish with that single white piping around the top, but at first glance these body parts do look very similar in their appearance to the successful Rickman Matisse items, but as I said, they only look similar because these are RTW parts and their very own design. And up at the bike's controls department we have those old school handlebars with the traditional crossbar, welded of course and not using clamps as on our modern day motocrossers, but a good quality gasser throttle there to help control all of those wild horses that are just waiting to be unleashed from that 600cc Norton twin engine. But those clutch and brake levers are quite unusual and not parts that I'm familiar with, but they still look very good quality items with those screw type adjusters for making adjustments to the cables. Although for me, personally speaking, this 600 Norton RT3 was without doubt one of my favourite bikes from the show this year, mainly because it was just so well engineered and it had those drop dead gorgeous looks as well. Now I haven't a clue as to what this bike would actually cost to build, but for sure if I did manage to get myself a little lottery win in the near future, I'd certainly be right on the phone to RTW to place my order for this fantastic looking machine. Now one of the other bikes that were sitting proudly on this stand was one of Rhind Tutt Wasp's lovely sidecar motocross outfits, and this beauty here was fitted with a Honda 750 4-cylinder power plant. Now here on CDB TV we never often get the chance to showcase many of these fantastic three-wheeled machines, as most of the racing events are now held in the south of the UK, which is at least 300 or 400 miles from where I currently live in Scotland. But again, looking at the quality and the looks of this racing outfit, you can't be anything but impressed with its engineering and Honda power plant. Although having said that, as beautiful as it is, I'm sorry, but you just wouldn't get me to be a passenger in one of these chariots. But from a spectator's point of view, you get a dozen or so of these three-wheelers lined up on the start line and racing around a motocross track, then it's certainly a fantastic spectacle and highly entertaining as well. But as in their RT3 solo chassis, this RT8 has some very good engineering in its steel tubular frame, which again are all bronze welded before then being covered in this nice nickel plating. But Rhind Tutt Wasp have been manufacturing these type of sidecar outfits for more than 60 years now, so as you'd expect, they do have a wealth of experience and engineering skills to continue to produce these very high quality products. Now if you were a biker in the early 1970s, then you'll certainly recognise this engine that's powering our RTW outfit, because this is the old CB 750 4-cylinder motor that powered Honda's big road bike of that era, a bike which at that time was said to be the first real Japanese superbike. But again, an unusual engine to fit into our outfit, as many of these trikes usually had Norton or even big Yamaha 4-stroke motors in their chassis back in the day. But for sure a sweet choice of power plant, because these four banger engines were superbly engineered and, though I have to say it, much better built and more reliable than anything that we had available in Britain at that time. But as I said, an unusual choice of engine because there can't be too many of these old CB750s still going around now, so I can imagine that parts for these engines might be an issue. And it was quite a thirsty motor with these four carburetors feeding that top end. Although, as I said earlier, the quality of the engineering on this machine is even evident here in these four custom-made exhaust pipes, which look like a plumber's nightmare, but once more, this was just all part and parcel of what was involved when RTW embarked on constructing one of these three-wheeled racers. Although I expect that once the Honda CB750 motor got fired into life, you'd certainly hear some sweet music played through this straight-through megaphone tailpipe. Now again, because this was a trike off-roader, they didn't have your conventional front forks that you'd have on a solo machine. It was this kind of leading link style suspension with a pair of shocks fitted on to either side. But of course these outfits weren't lightweight with all of that extra weight and the two operators on board, so you needed a sizable front brake to slow the bike down, and our model here has an old school drum brake, but later models tended to opt for the more efficient hydraulic disc brake bolted onto the front. But nevertheless, a nice layout of front suspension system on this RT8. And again at the back it was a conventional drum brake system, but when that 750 motor lit up this back wheel, this tyre could certainly dig some nice trenches and throw up a good few rooster tails in the process. But no matter where you look on this bike, it just seems to ooze quality and first-class engineering, and it even has this custom-made alloy mudguard for the chair's side wheel. Now, as you already know, riding these sidecar outfits is all about balance and moving your weight all over the bike to keep that all-important weight distribution correct, and that's why they are fitted with these extra long and quite lush seats, because it is a bit of an art form balancing these machines in a racing situation. And if you've ever had the chance to watch the driver and passenger in action on one of these bikes, then you'll know that they almost never ever sit in the same position for more than a few seconds at a time, as they both have to move continuously to keep the outfit balanced up. But the controls on our RTW outfit are much the same as would be fitted onto our RT3 solo bike, other than of course the addition of this little engine kill switch, which the driver would simply wrap around his wrist by a short electrical cable, just in case he was separated from his machine, whereby the switch would then be deployed and the motor stopped. But even although these three-wheeled sidecar outfits are not our usual bread and butter kind of bikes that we normally feature here on CDB TV, these two examples here, the RT3 Norton Solo and this lovely Honda 750 four-cylinder outfit, were certainly up there with some of the best bikes that were on display over the 2 days of the show. But as I said, if money was no object, I'd without question just buy both of these examples, not to race, but just to sit back and admire the fantastic engineering that's gone into putting them all together. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. Personally for me, I thought those were a couple of really nice bikes on the Rhind Tutt Wasp stand at the show. A nice solo machine, powered of course by that Norton engine and that lovely sidecar outfit, also powered by a big 750 Honda 4-stroke power plant. So a lovely couple of bikes there on the Rhind Tutt Wasp stand. But coming up next here on CDB TV, we'll be featuring another machine from the Telford Classic Dirt Bike Show, and this time round we'll be taking a look at this 490 Myco. Now this bike was built in 1981, but is one of those machines that never actually went into production, although they did make a similar machine to this in 1982. But you'll get the full story about this very rare machine when we return to CDB TV. But until the next time, thanks again for watching my channel, and we'll speak again very soon. But until then, it's goodbye for now.